Welcome back to Late Agenda. Mental health professionals have been pushing hard for it. The government's own National Health and Hospitals Reform Commission report urged immediate action on mental health spending. The opposition has also pushed for change. Finally, in the May budget, the Gillard government pledged a massive $2.2 billion injection into the mental health sector. So will that injection be enough, and will it address the real needs in the community? To discuss this, I'm joined by the 2010 Australian of the Year and tireless campaigner for reform in this area, psychiatrist Pat McGorry, who's Professor at the University of Melbourne's Centre for Youth Mental Health, and he's in our Melbourne studio. Josh Frydenberg is Liberal MP for the seat of Kooyong in Melbourne, who isn't an expert, but he has been touched personally by suicide, and he's passionately pushed for reform in this area, and he's in our Canberra studio. And researcher and clinical psychologist Dr Anthony Kidman is the Director of Health Psychology Unit at the University of Technology in Sydney, and he's with me in the Sydney studio. Welcome to you all. Pat McGorry, if I could start with you, can you just set the scene for us? I mean, how prevalent in the community is mental illness? What percentage of the community does it touch?
Well, Helen, 4.4 million Australians every year are directly affected by diagnosable mental ill health. So that's around about 20% of the population. That rises to about 1 in 4, 25% of the population in teenagers and young adults. So it's very widespread, and of course all of these people have family members as well. So, you know, it's a mainstream public health issue, and it's the greatest area of neglect in our health system, because only a bit more than 1/3 of those people get any access to mental health care.
Well, you've set the scene for us. Before we go on with our conversation, let's have a listen to the way Treasurer Wayne Swan announced the new funding initiatives in this year's budget.
Untreated mental illness can lead to disengagement, unemployment, family breakdown, substance abuse, homelessness and, sadly, suicide. We demonstrate our commitment to addressing mental illness by making the room in a tight budget for $1.5 billion in new initiatives as part of our $2.2 billion package to deliver better care.
Professor McGorry, when the budget announcements were made, you and your colleagues, who'd been very strong advocates for reform and for more funding, were overjoyed. You were publicly saying this is a great step forward. Now that you've had time to digest more of it, when the funding actually kicks in, because some of it is pushed out for a couple of years, and who it's going to get to, is it really a giant step forward?
I wouldn't say it's a giant step forward. I think it's a very encouraging first step in a long road. Our goal is that we get equity between mental ill health and physical ill health. So at the moment we're spending about 7% of the national health budget on mental health care. It's 14% of the health burden in this country. So we have got a long way to go. But the government did redeem on its promise to make this a second-term agenda, and we're much closer now to tripartisan support. And I think all sides of politics, as you said, I think at the beginning, are now in support of this kind of investment. But we must disabuse people of the idea that we've somehow now done mental health. That would be a very dangerous thing to think. We have to have continuously expanding investment over the next decade if we're going to really reach that goal. And we have to concentrate now on the implementation of reform, so that this money, these precious dollars, as the Treasurer said, are well spent and actually get to improve the mental health care of Australians across the country.
Yeah, Tony Kidman, I mean, you might have some challenges and some qualms about some of it, which we will get to later, but overall, do you give this spending and these new initiatives a big tick? Is it a good step forward?
I believe it is, and I must say that Pat's been one of the key movers in this, and it's a great pleasure to be on the same panel with him. I agree, we still have a long way to go, but it's a major step forward, and particularly for the young people, early intervention programs, quite substantial money, headspace, Pat knows all about this, and that will spread out across the country But one of the areas that's very important is a reasonable amount of money, we still need a lot more, for chronically, seriously mentally ill people, particularly those with chronic schizophrenia. And we've been working with young people mainly, but we have a huge backlog of people who would love to see us at our unit suffering from chronic schizophrenia, and we just don't have the resources to do that in conjunction with the North Shore Hospital and so on. So there's some steps forward, but a long way to go, and I'd certainly like to talk about some of the detail in due course.
Sure, we will get to that. Pat McGorry, is the new funding the actual new funding seems to be about $1.5 billion over 5 years. Now, is that enough to make it a more coordinated approach to people with mental illness? Because one of the huge criticisms, you know, over the last couple of years is it's been a very uncoordinated sector.
Well, I think Tony's absolutely right that there are two foci. One is to turn off the tap and prevent the new waves of young people who are developing new forms of mental illness from ending up on the scrap heap of the DSP. That's certainly you know, a key focus, but that's only 25% of the new funding. The bulk of it is actually devoted to the patients Tony was referring to the extent that the federal government can do that. So over $500 million is meant to improve coordination of care. Now, we don't know what that actually means yet, and I think we've got to be very careful about how that money is spent, and I think also we have to make sure that the state governments, who have the fundamental responsibility at the moment for looking after those patients, and they seriously underfund the care of those patients at state level too. So the state governments now, the ball's very much in their court too, to come to the party at COAG later in the year and to address the issue that Tony mentioned.
Of course, Tony Kidman, I mean, state governments, you know, are very important. Would you support those comments?
I certainly do, and we've been negotiating with in our case, the New South Wales state government. We've actually had a little bit of success there. We've had a substantial grant from them for our early intervention program, but it's been a bit of a labyrinth because the coordination between the federal government and the state government, as Pat says, requires negotiations and skill and so on, and I'm just hoping that these funds do get down to the coalface.
Do you think because the federal government is committing this sort of money, that might put more pressure on various state governments, not just New South Wales, to come to the party?
I would think so, and I've seen. I had a meeting with, and I'm sure Pat's had many, with the federal minister, Mark.
Butler.
Pat Butler, thank you. And it was quite a good one. This was before the budget. And he intimated that there would be better coordination, etc., etc. But, you know, we'll remain to see how it unfolds.
Yeah.
The other thing, if I can bring it up, is there has been quite a disturbing trend in the fact that the federal government has cut back the number of sessions which people can obtain Medicare rebates going to clinical psychologists.
I'm certainly going to ask you about that. So they have cut that back, so you won't be able to get it subsidised by Medicare as many of the sessions?
Correct. You used to be able to get 6 plus 6. You had to get a mental health plan from a GP or a psychiatrist, and that was a terrific boon for thousands of people to get one-to-one therapy for all sorts of mental illnesses. That's been cut back to 6 with maybe and 4 more. That's so we're going from 12 to 10. We used to be able to get in exceptional circumstances, and for our patients with schizophrenia, another 6. And we were offering a 20-session plan as part of our program, part of this research study, when that seems to have disappeared. So I think that's quite a regressive, retrograde step that needs to be addressed. I don't know what Pat thinks about that.
So your unit is going to be hurt by that?
We are, most seriously, because we get we're very much not dependent on it, but it's a very important element, and people suffering from chronic schizophrenia, psychosis and other serious mental illnesses are not well off by and large. They aren't.
So they were able to be bulk billed. Yes?
That's not the only thing that's been cut. I mean, I think while we have to welcome the new money, about $500 million over the forward estimates, as Tony said, there has been cuts to the number of visits you can make to a psychologist, but also for the rebates for seeing your GP about mental health issues. And this is of great concern to us because while we welcome multidisciplinary care, we don't want to see individual health providers curbed in their fee-for-service provision, importantly with GPs and psychologists.
Yeah, Pat McGorry, have you got a thought about that? Because that would seem to be cutting off a great area where people do need help.
Yeah, look, I think the first thing to say is that both general practitioners and psychologists and other allied health professionals are absolutely the cornerstone of early intervention and particularly important in the Headspace model. So you know, I think that point really needs to be reinforced. What the government's done is obviously redirect funding here, and it has caused some concern. In relation to the psychologists, what I've been told, and I'm certainly planning to go back and check this carefully, is that the average number of sessions that people receive under the Barrett Access Scheme is about 5 or 6. So the argument has been put that, well, you know, it's not going to affect that many people, and also the claim has been made that the money will be directed to some extent, I'm not sure to what extent, into the ATAP scheme, so that the sort of patients that Tony is talking about, people who need longer term care, more complex problems, will get support through a different scheme. Now, Tony may have more detail on that, so I'd be interested in his views.
Well, yes, I have some figures from the Australian Psychological Society. About 74% of people receive 1 to 6 sessions, 21% 7 to 12, 5% 13 to 18.
Yeah, so the bulk of people are getting that 1 to 6 sessions.
The 5% are the very seriously affected people. And of course the psychologists...
And they need the longer number of sessions.
And they're all around Australia and so on, and whether there's special arrangements and special access and so on and special teams. But out there in Burke or Narrabri or whatever is where we would hope people can get the help they need.
All right, I actually want to talk more about regional Australia, but we need to take a short break. We're going to have a break, but do stay with us on Late Agenda, our special look at mental health. We're back right after this.